Coming home early was supposed to be a good thing. The meeting in Denver had been canceled last minute. Some logistics issue, a scheduling conflict with another regional partner. The whole thing dissolved in under 10 minutes, and instead of sulking in a hotel room all day, I figured I'd catch the first flight home. Surprise Sarah. Maybe even pick up her favorite croissants from that overpriced bakery on Cedar. We'd been off lately, not fighting exactly, but not clicking either. I thought maybe this could help shift the energy. I don't know what I was expecting when I opened the front door. Maybe her curled up on the couch with a book, the house filled with the scent of coffee and dryer sheets. Something domestic and familiar. But the moment I stepped into our bedroom, I knew I wasn't walking into that version of reality. There was a shirt, a man's white dress shirt, clean and crisp, hanging over the handle of the bedroom closet. Definitely not mine. Different brand, different fit. Slim cut, expensive fabric. I hadn't bought a shirt like that in my life, and I sure as hell didn't hang my laundry on door handles. I stepped closer. A paper tag clung to the collar, a dry cleaning slip from a hotel downtown. My stomach dropped just slightly. The hotel's name was printed in that gold foil they use when they want to look more exclusive than they actually are. On the nightstand, there was a small receipt folded once in half. I picked it up with the tips of my fingers, like it might burn me. 2SH*TS of tequila. Cheese plate. Paid in cash. I didn't need to be Sherlock Holmes to see what that looked like. The receipt was time-stamped for 11:43 p.m. on a Thursday night. Sarah had told me she was at a late strategy session for a donor campaign that night. Something about a backlog in proposals and needing to help a junior colleague format a report. I glanced toward the window. 2 glasses stood on the sill. Something she always did when she was too tired to carry them to the sink. One glass was hers. I recognized the half-circle stain of lipstick she only wore to galas or donor events. A shade I hadn't seen in months. The other glass was untouched, but there were faint fingerprints along the rim. Broader, maybe male. That's when I heard the bathroom door creak open. Sarah walked in wearing her towel turban, wiping her face with a hand towel like it was any other day. Her robe was cinched loosely around her waist, and she didn't look surprised to see me. "Oh," she said, blinking once. "I didn't know you were coming home early." "Meeting got canceled," I said, voice dry. I held up the shirt by its hanger, dangling it slightly. "Who's this belong to?" She looked at it like she hadn't seen it before, then smiled just a little too quickly. "Oh, that's Josh's. From work. He spilled wine on his shirt at the donor mixer. I offered to get it dry cleaned because I had a hotel pickup anyway. He must have left it here when we were prepping that slide deck." "Josh?" I asked. "Which Josh?" She didn't miss a beat. "Josh from the compliance team. He started back in April. We had that dinner with him and his wife, remember? Super tall, a little awkward?" I didn't remember, at least not clearly. I was still holding the shirt, my fingers twisting the hanger absently. "Okay," I said. She moved around me, opening the closet door and taking a pair of jeans off a hanger, completely at ease. "I was going to bring it in today, actually. You know me, if it's not my stuff, I forget it's even there. And this." I held up the receipt. She glanced at it, gave a small laugh. "Oh my God, that must have fallen out of my purse. I met Anna for drinks after the mixer. We split a cheese plate, did SH*TS like idiots. I didn't even realize I paid in cash." Her tone was light, easy, practiced. She leaned over and kissed my cheek. Her skin was still warm from the shower. "Babe, if I'd known you were coming home, I'd have picked up groceries. There's barely anything in the fridge." And just like that, the moment passed. But it hadn't passed for me. I nodded like it made sense. Like her answers added up. Like I wasn't already thinking back to the other little things I'd dismissed. The quick phone lock when I walked into the room. The nights she got home late without a clear reason. The way her perfume had shifted from light florals to something heavier, bolder, not what she used to wear for me. Sarah disappeared into the bathroom again, and I stood there, surrounded by details that didn't quite fit. A shirt, a receipt, a wine glass with someone else's lipstick on it. The version of events she gave me could have made sense. In theory. It was the speed of it all that rattled me. The way her explanations rolled out like pre-scripted lines. Too smooth, too polished, like she'd run this scenario in her head a few times before. And the way she smiled, not fake, not forced, just practiced. I stood there in the silence after she left the room and stared at that white shirt, still hanging from the closet handle like a challenge. That was the moment something cracked. Not loudly, not visibly, but deep beneath the surface. Quiet and certain. I didn't blow up. I didn't accuse her. I didn't demand passwords or names or timelines. I just nodded and smiled and walked into the kitchen and asked her if she wanted coffee. She said yes and added cream like always, and we sat across from each other like we hadn't just rewritten the truth to make it more comfortable. But inside, something had shifted. Something irreversible. She was good at hiding things. Better than I thought. But this time, she'd left behind something she couldn't explain away, and I wasn't sure yet what it meant. But I knew enough to realize this wasn't just about a shirt or a receipt or a drink. It was about the kind of lie you tell with your whole face. The kind you build a version of your life around. And suddenly, I wasn't sure how much of that life had ever been real. Later that day, I sat in my car outside the grocery store, engine idling, hands on the steering wheel, but I wasn't going anywhere. I had picked up a loaf of sourdough and some eggs, but I hadn't moved from the driver's seat in 10 minutes. Something about the silence in the car gave me permission to think clearly, to finally let the questions surface without pushing them down like I usually did. The shirt was still in my head. So was the receipt. And Sarah's face. Her calmness. The way she answered me like she'd practiced it. Like she already knew what I was going to ask before I said a word. She hadn't panicked. She hadn't hesitated. That part scared me more than the shirt itself. I turned off the engine, leaned back in the seat, and let my eyes close. That's when everything started coming together. The moments I'd shrugged off. The stories that hadn't added up but that I had wanted to believe badly enough not to dig deeper. Little things, nothing on their own, but together they were a mosaic. One I hadn't wanted to look at until now. It started months ago, maybe longer. I remember it now, how her morning routine had changed. She used to kiss me goodbye while I was half asleep, whispering something about breakfast or yoga or needing almond milk. But lately, the mornings had become shorter, quieter. She'd slide out of bed gently, grab her phone, and leave the room. No kisses, no softness, and the texts. That was another shift. She'd always been a texter, especially when things were good between us. Midday messages, little gifts, a photo of her coffee cup with a heart in the foam, a note that said, "Thinking of you." Those had stopped gradually, replaced with short answers. "Busy today. Can't talk right now. Back-to-back meetings." I'd asked her once, weeks ago, if everything was okay. She smiled, said she was just swamped. "It's grant season," she told me. "Everyone's losing their minds." She always had an answer, and I always took it. There was another time I couldn't stop thinking about. I come home early from work, like today, but a few months back. She was in the kitchen, laughing into her phone. When she heard the door open, she turned abruptly, and the laugh died. She ended the call a little too fast. I'd asked who it was. She said it was Anna, her colleague. Said they were venting about a board member who had compared women in leadership to emotional hurricanes. I remember thinking how bizarre that sounded, but she brushed it off and kissed me on the cheek like always. I wanted to believe it, but something about the way she turned her phone over, face down, stuck with me. She hadn't used to do that. Now it was automatic. Every time we were in the same room, her phone sat face down. Always. I knew that move. I'd seen other people do it at restaurants when they didn't want their dates seeing who was texting them. Or worse, when they didn't want the date they were with to know they had others. I never thought Sarah would be that kind of person. But then again, I never thought she'd lie to me with a smile on her face, either. There were other signs, too. Small but sharp in hindsight. She used to ask me to pick her up from work when it rained. Even if she had her car, she liked riding together, said it gave her time to decompress. Lately, she'd been calling last minute to say she was taking a cab. Someone from the donor team is heading the same way, she'd explain. It's easier this way. Once or twice I offered to meet her out front anyway. She insisted I didn't need to, said it was silly that she was a big girl, not a high schooler waiting for her ride. I laughed with her, played along. And then there was the scent. A cologne I didn't recognize, faint but there. I'd smelled it on her once when she came home late. Said she hugged a board member goodbye, one of those older guys who practically bathed in aftershave. I made a joke about it. She laughed, changed the subject. That happened at least 3 times. Maybe more. At the time, I figured I was being paranoid. I told myself trust meant giving the benefit of the doubt. I prided myself on not being controlling, not checking her messages, not hovering. I wanted her to feel free with me. I never wanted to be that guy, the one who turned marriage into a cage. But maybe, without meaning to, I made it too easy for her to lie. I remember a Sunday when I came back from the gym and the house smelled like her perfume. The strong one. The one she only used for big events. She said she'd sprayed it on a scarf, didn't like the scent, tossed it in the laundry. At the time, I nodded and went about my day. Now I wasn't so sure. Another afternoon, maybe 6 weeks ago, I'd gone upstairs to get something from the guest bathroom, and I found a strand of long blonde hair in the sink. Not Sarah's. Her hair was chestnut brown, and this was freshly shed, still clinging to the porcelain. I'd asked about it. She said Rachel had come over, and they'd gotten ready together before going out. You were at that cybersecurity mixer, remember? She added. Rachel used my flat iron. You know how she sheds like crazy. Again, it made sense. Or it could have. But Rachel had texted me the day after and thanked me for the bottle of wine we left on the counter. Hope you and Sarah had a great night, she said, which didn't track with Sarah's story. Still, I didn't push. I didn't want to be that husband who interrogates every loose end. But now, sitting in the car, those loose ends started knotting together in my head. Every explanation had a shadow behind it. Every detail she offered was a little too neat. Even the house itself felt different lately, like someone had been inside when I wasn't home. The towels rearranged. The throw blanket folded a different way. Once, a coffee mug was in the sink that I hadn't used. Not in days. And Sarah never used that one. Said it was too heavy. But there it was, coffee ring still fresh, right next to a spoon with honey on it. She never put honey in her coffee. I wanted to believe I was imagining things. That stress was getting to me. But that didn't explain the gut-level dread I felt whenever she smiled at me too quickly. Or how her embrace had changed. Not colder exactly, but more careful. Like she was trying to replicate something instead of actually feeling it. The thing about doubt is it starts small. A whisper. An itch. You tell yourself not to listen. But then the whispers collect. They form a pattern. And once you see the pattern, really see it, you can't unsee it. I sat there in the car for a long time, letting it all wash over me. The pieces were no longer scattered. They had formed something recognizable. Not just suspicion. Not just anxiety. But truth. The kind of truth you don't need evidence to feel. Because it lives in your body. In the spaces between what's said and what's actually meant. The pattern was there. And even if I wasn't ready to name it out loud, I knew one thing for certain. I wasn't crazy. Something was wrong. And Sarah was hiding it. Came on a Wednesday. Gray skies. Scattered rain. One of those days that settles into your bones and makes everything feel heavier than it is. I'd gone to the post office on my lunch break, just to pick up a small package I'd been expecting from a vendor. Nothing urgent, just an HDMI adapter. But when I got there, the clerk handed me 2 envelopes. One was mine. The other was addressed to me, but the return address caught my attention. It wasn't a company. It wasn't a person I knew. Just a first name, Daniel, scribbled above a P.O. box out in Tacoma. There was no stamp, just a metered postage label, printed in a faded red. I almost tossed it in the passenger seat unopened. Junk mail, maybe. Spam. But something about it felt deliberate, like it wasn't meant to be ignored. I opened it right there in the parking lot. No letter, no message, just a single photograph inside. A candid, grainy image. Bar lighting. A couple seated on a low leather couch. their silhouettes washed in amber tones. The man was facing the camera, grinning wide, his head tilted back. The woman was angled slightly away, nestled into his chest. Her lips were brushing his neck, like she was whispering something into his skin. I didn't breathe for a second, because even though the lighting was dim and the resolution wasn't sharp, I knew the shape of her jaw, the fall of her hair, the curve of her shoulder. It was Sarah, and she wasn't at a work function. She wasn't reviewing donor slide decks or formatting outreach templates. She was on some bar's couch, laughing, relaxed, fully immersed in this man, like I didn't exist. I flipped the photo over. On the back, someone had scribbled a date. Last Thursday. I checked the timestamp on my phone's calendar. That was the night she said she was with a friend. Rachel again. Movie night. Supposedly low-key. She'd worn her hair tied up when she left, claiming she was too tired to do anything but chill. I even remembered her apologizing in advance. Don't wait up, babe. We might order wine and vent about work all night. But there she was, wearing that same lipstick I'd seen on the glass. The deep red. The one she told me she didn't like anymore. Too bold for my skin tone, she had said once, but she was wearing it that night. And in the background, barely visible through the bar's window, was our car. My car, parked out front. It wasn't just damning. It was deliberate. Every piece of the puzzle suddenly fit. The shirt, the tequila sh*TS, the cheese plate, the receipt, the lipstick-stained glass, the carefully folded towel on the bathroom rack. All of it clicked into place like a lock turning. It was like someone had quietly left breadcrumbs in my own life, leading me to this moment. I sat there in my car, staring down at the photo again. My fingers trembled slightly, not from anger, not even from sadness, but from the sheer magnitude of recognition. Like something inside me had been holding back a tidal wave, and the first drop had finally slipped through. I didn't scream. I didn't punch the dashboard or throw the photo across the car. I just sat with it, and I felt something shift. I went home that evening like nothing had changed. I cooked dinner, washed the dishes, asked Sarah about her day. She talked about an upcoming fundraiser, how the marketing team couldn't decide on a slogan. I nodded, made all the right sounds. She leaned over and kissed my cheek before going upstairs to catch up on emails. I slid the photo into a folder in my desk drawer, tucked behind tax documents and passport renewals. I didn't confront her, not yet, because the truth was no longer hypothetical. It wasn't a suspicion or a fear or a feeling I had to justify to myself. It existed, printed in color, right there on glossy paper. I didn't need to imagine scenarios or search for clues anymore. I had proof. And in that moment, the proof didn't make me angry. It made me still. There's something deeply quiet about certainty. Something eerily calm. For weeks, maybe months, I'd been clawing at the edges of doubt, begging for something to tell me I wasn't losing my mind. Now I had it. She was cheating. It didn't matter if it was emotional or physical or whatever word she'd try to wrap it in later. What mattered was the look on her face in that photo. The way she smiled without reservation. The way her body leaned into him so naturally. Like muscle memory. Like home. That's the part that hurt most. Not the act itself, but the ease of it. How familiar it looked. How practiced. I remembered what it used to feel like to hold her like that. To be the one she whispered to in dimly lit rooms. I tried to think back. When had it changed? When did her laughter start feeling like something I overheard, rather than something shared? The strange. The way your brain rewires memories once you know the truth. You replay everything, watching it now with the knowledge that there was another version happening in parallel. One you weren't invited into. One built in shadows and omissions. And then you start to wonder, did they laugh at you? Did they talk about you? Did she compare your lives, his and mine, the way people compare hotels or cities? Did I ever come up at all? That night, I didn't sleep much. I lay on the couch with the TV on mute, staring at the ceiling, listening to the quiet tick of the hallway clock. Around 3 a.m., I heard her get up for water. Her footsteps padded softly into the kitchen. I stayed still, pretending to sleep. She didn't know I knew. She still thought the world was intact. And something about that made me feel powerful. Not in a cruel way, but in the sense that, for the first time in a long while, I wasn't the one stumbling around in the dark. I'd found the light switch. The next morning, I made her coffee. Extra cream, no sugar. Just how she liked it. She smiled, said, "Thanks, babe," and kissed my cheek again. Kiss I didn't return. She didn't notice. And maybe that said more than anything else. I carried on like everything was normal. Because now I needed time. Not to heal, not yet, but to think. To plan. To decide what my next move would be. Revenge didn't interest me. Explosions were messy, and she'd always been good at surviving chaos. What I wanted wasn't fire. It was clarity, control, and most of all, distance. I wanted to exit the stage quietly, but on my own terms, because she had taken something from me, piece by piece, lie by lie, and I had just decided that I was done letting her keep it. 2 days after the photograph, I told Sarah I had to leave town for work. It was a lie. There was no client meeting in San Jose. No urgent cybersecurity breach I had to resolve. But she didn't question it. She just nodded, said she'd miss me, and asked if I needed help packing. I told her I'd be gone for 3 days. That seemed like enough. I didn't take much. Just a duffel bag, my laptop, and the folder with the photograph and the receipt. I left behind my work badge, a subtle test. If she noticed it sitting on the dresser and called to tell me I forgot it, I'd know she wasn't planning anything. She never called. I drove 2 towns over and checked into a quiet hotel off the interstate, one of those extended stay places with a kitchenette and blackout curtains. I didn't do much the first night, just stared at the ceiling, watched reruns of shows I didn't care about, and read through our old texts, back when she still sent emojis and called me pet names. The next morning, I drove to a trail outside Flagstaff, hiked for a while, thought about what I would say when I got back, whether I would say anything at all, whether she'd even be there. Turns out I didn't have to decide. When I walked through the front door on Sunday afternoon, the house felt hollow. It was clean, too clean, the kind of clean that meant someone had tried to erase themselves from it. There was a note on the kitchen table, folded, centered perfectly, her handwriting small and even, like she was trying not to reveal too much with the curves of her letters. "Mark, I'm sorry. I know this feels sudden, but it's been coming for a long time. I didn't know how to say it. I didn't want to hurt you, even though I know I already have. I need something different. I need to find myself again. I'll be in touch. Please take care of yourself. Sarah." That was it. No, I love you. No, I didn't mean for this to happen. No mention of the man from the photo, no confession, no lie. Just a sterile farewell written like a business memo. I read it twice, then a third time. I didn't feel shock. I didn't even feel grief. Just a strange kind of confirmation, like I'd already lived this moment 100 times in my head. And now the real version was finally catching up. She was gone. No suitcase in the closet. No toothbrush in the holder. No books on the nightstand. She even took her favorite mug, the one with the tiny crack near the handle that she refused to throw out. What she left behind was intentional. The things that didn't matter to her. Her old yoga mat, pair of earrings she hadn't worn in years, the sweater I bought her for our anniversary, still folded, tags still on. I walked through the house like a stranger. She didn't just leave. She'd planned this. Every drawer she'd emptied. Every item she'd taken. Every trace she'd erased. This wasn't a sudden decision. She'd been rehearsing this exit for months. I sat on the edge of the bed and looked at the space where her shoes used to line up perfectly. There was an indentation in the carpet where her dresser had stood, like the house was still trying to remember her. And that was the cruelest part. She had written the note like it was mutual, like it was inevitable, as if we'd both let go at the same time. As if we'd both been drifting and she just happened to step off the boat first. But the truth? She was gone because she had been planning her escape long before I found that photo. Long before the shirt. Long before the glass on the sill. Maybe even before I noticed the changes in her voice, the silence between our sentences. She'd decided. She just hadn't told me, because telling me would have required honesty. And honesty was never part of her exit strategy. I sat there for a long time, just sitting, listening to the clock tick, the fridge hum, the wind tap gently against the windows. The house was quiet in a way I didn't recognize. Not peaceful, not even lonely, just quiet, like it was holding its breath, waiting to see what I'd do next. I didn't cry. I didn't punch a wall or scream into a pillow. I just stood up, opened the drawer of my desk, and took out the photograph. Her smile in the picture looked effortless. The way she leaned into him, whoever he was, like she'd been doing it for years. It wasn't new. It wasn't spontaneous. It was something she had chosen. Repeatedly, I stared at it, wondering who sent it. Daniel. No last name. No note. Just a name and a return address. Whoever he was, he wanted me to know. Maybe a friend of the man in the photo. Maybe someone who thought I deserved the truth. I owed him more than I owed her. That evening, I walked through the house and made a list. Not of what she took, but of what she left behind. What I had to rebuild. What I had to reclaim. Because it wasn't just about her absence. It was about my presence. I'd spent so long trying to hold on to what we were. I hadn't noticed she was already gone. And the worst part? She hadn't even left room for me in her goodbye. No confrontation. No fight. No chance to say, "You hurt me." No moment to slam the door or ask why or demand to know the name of the man who knew the version of her I no longer recognized. She left like a ghost. And suddenly I realized she'd always been planning to. The way she'd pulled away. The way she'd stopped answering my calls right away. The way she dismissed my questions with practiced ease. She wasn't just cheating on me. She was writing herself out of our story. Quietly, gradually, like a character who fades before the ending. She didn't want a messy breakup. She wanted to disappear without being the villain. So she wrote a note, softened her exit, made it look mutual. But I knew better. She hadn't wanted to face what she'd done, because facing me meant seeing what she broke. And maybe that was the part she couldn't live with. Not the affair, not the lie, but the mirror, the reflection of the woman she became, and what she was willing to destroy just to feel something new. I folded the note, placed it back on the table, and turned off the lights. For the first time in a long while, I wasn't waiting for her to come home, because she already had to someone else. 5 years later, I'd almost convinced myself it was another life. I lived in Portland now. My name wasn't on any of the same databases, not the ones that mattered. I changed it legally a year after Sarah left. New name, new license, new start. The only thing that followed me was my own reflection. And even that looked different now. The stress lines had faded. My eyes didn't scan every room like they used to. I cut my hair short, stopped shaving every day. People here knew me as someone else, and honestly, that was a relief. I worked in cybersecurity, the same field, but with more distance. No front-facing roles. No conferences. No LinkedIn posts. Just code and protocols and quiet. I liked it that way. My apartment was small but clean. Sparse. The kind of place where every item had its purpose, and nothing collected dust. I cooked for myself, read more, got into wood carving. Something about shaping things with my hands helped. Therapy came and went. I didn't need a weekly appointment anymore, just the occasional check-in. I told myself I was better, and I believed it. Mostly. Then the invitation came. It was a sleek, heavy envelope, the kind used for weddings or galas or things you don't throw away without guilt. There was no return address, just the name of the event stamped in foil. Northwest Tech Innovators Conference, Seattle. Inside was a letter. I'd been selected, or rather, Michael Benton had, for a keynote honor. An algorithm I'd helped design had been quietly implemented into a multi-platform national system. I hadn't even known it had spread that far. Apparently, someone submitted it for a review, and it passed through the nomination panel anonymously. The event was in 3 weeks. Hotel and travel covered. Media exposure optional. I nearly tossed it, but there was something about the timing. Or maybe I was just tired of hiding. I stared at the envelope on my desk for 2 days before I finally booked the train ticket. The day of the conference was bright, unusually so for Seattle. Blue skies, sharp sunlight bouncing off the convention center's glass walls. I wore a charcoal blazer and a black button-down, nothing flashy. I had no intention of standing on stage. Just show up, accept the plaque, leave. I checked in under my legal name. A young man in a headset typed on his iPad, nodded, and handed me a guest badge printed on the spot. But when I looked down at it, my stomach turned. It didn't say Michael Benton. It said Mark Halter. My real name. My old name. I froze. My pulse skipped. "Is everything okay, sir?" the staffer asked. I nodded once too quickly. "Yeah, just surprised." I submitted under an alias. He smiled politely. "Our system must have matched it to your original patent. The verification database pulled your legal identity from the original Git commit history. I can print another if you'd like." "No," I said. "It's fine." It wasn't. I walked into the main atrium with the badge clipped to my jacket, suddenly hyper-aware of every eye that might glance my way. The first hour passed without incident. I made small talk, watched a panel on data security threats, ate half a sandwich I couldn't taste, and then I saw her, Sarah, standing near the digital guest board. She was in a navy blazer, a thin scarf knotted loosely around her neck. Her hair was shorter now, styled in those clean, professional waves. She looked good, polished, important. And then she saw me. Her face changed instantly. It was like watching a fault line crack in real time. Her entire posture faltered. Her mouth parted slightly, eyes wide, fixed on my badge. We stood there 30 feet apart, surrounded by professionals, cameras, tech booths, and I watched her break. Not loudly. Not dramatically, just snap. She took one step toward me, then another and collapsed. Her knees buckled. She crumpled sideways near the registration table, knocking over a stand-up display. Shouts followed. A small crowd formed. Someone called out for a medic. I didn't move. I stayed at the edge of the crowd, just outside her line of sight. Paramedics arrived. They lifted her onto a stretcher. Someone asked if she had a condition. No one knew. She was pale. Her eyes flickered open for a moment. Her lips moved, but I couldn't hear what she said. I stood still, hands in my pockets, heart pounding. And then I turned and walked away. I skipped the award, left the badge on a table near the hallway exit, found a side door and slipped into the street. I stood there on the sidewalk for several minutes, staring at the traffic light like it was some kind of oracle. The universe had brought her back to me, not as a second chance, but as a disruption. A glitch. She wasn't supposed to see me again. Not ever. And yet there we were. The next morning, I did something I hadn't done in 5 years. I visited a hospital. I used a fake name at the front desk and asked if she was still admitted. She was. Room 324. Observation wing. I told them I was an old friend. They let me in without question. When I walked in, she was asleep. A tube ran into her arm, and the heart monitor pulsed steadily. There were flowers on the window ledge. Cards. Notes. One envelope stood out. Heavy cream cardstock. Thick gold seal. The name embossed on the front. Nathan Calloway. I recognized it immediately. He was a philanthropist. Big donor in the Pacific Northwest. Tech investor turned humanitarian. His face had been on magazine covers. The card inside was handwritten. Get better soon. The world still needs you. And there were articles on the bedside table, clippings, printouts. Photos of Sarah at ribbon cuttings holding oversized donation checks. One had a caption that stopped me cold. Sarah Halter Calloway, Regional Director for Pacific Aid, accepts $3 million pledge from anonymous donor. Halter Calloway. She'd taken his name. But that wasn't the part that stunned me. In one article, an older profile piece, there was a line buried in the second paragraph. Following the tragic loss of her first husband during a volunteer project abroad, Sarah Halter Calloway has dedicated her life to service. Tragic loss. She told them I was dead.